Hello. Welcome to another class of politics, history, and power. This time, we will continue the discourse on self-determination. But there is a case study. Something happened in Ibadan last week. That is the case study. So welcome to State Affairs, coming to you from State Affairs Studio in Ibadan. I am Edmund Obilo. In an unexpected turn of events, members of the Yoruba Nation, a fringe separatist group known as Ominira Yoruba, made headlines last weekend for their bold actions against the Nigerian state. Their protest took a dramatic turn as they stormed the governor's office and the House of Assembly in Ibadan, in Oyo State, with the intention of replacing the Nigerian flag with that of the Yoruba Nation. However, their efforts were met with resistance from the police and other security agents, preventing the group from achieving their goal. Despite the setback, Modupe Onitiri Abiola, a prominent figure and spouse of the late Chief Moshood Kashimawo Abiola, who won the June 12, 1993 election, boldly proclaimed the secession of the Yoruba from Nigeria. Is there something unique about her declaration? Meanwhile, the leaders of the Yoruba Nation, Banji Akintoye and Sunday Igboho, have distanced themselves from the group's action, emphasizing their commitment to peaceful means of achieving their objectives. So this is the subject we are looking at, but it's going to be a deeper subject. We will go into history, analysis, and we will look at politics and power. I'm not doing this alone. I'm doing this with Tade Ipadeola. It's good to have you on State Affairs.
It's good to be here, Edmund. Quite a while.
Tade Ipadeola is a lawyer. He is the author of the Sahara Testament, and he is a winner of the Delphic Laurel in poetry. Nigeria is poetry, is it not?
Indeed. As a matter of fact, one can say, as there is a witticism in Nigeria, that if somebody explains Nigeria to you and you understand it, that person has not explained it very well. So in that regard, it is like poetry.
So poetry is not a simple narrative.
No, not at all. It's always deeper than what meets the eye.
Nigeria is a complex state.
Indeed, very much so.
When you heard the story of the invasion of the Oyo State House of Assembly on Saturday, how did you feel?
I would not say I was shocked or surprised. The reason is that ever since Isaac Adaka Boro, there have been several attempts by fringe elements in Nigeria to say we no longer want to be part of this. However, an element of this particular invasion took me by surprise. This is the first time that there is going to be such a move by members of the same ethnicity as somebody who is in the center. So this time around, the circumference and the center seem to be, at odds and loggerheads, which has not happened before. When it was Isaac Adaka Boro, it was not an Ijaw man who was at the center. And you can go on and on up till that day.
When it was Adaka Boro, it was Ironsi.
Yes. In fact, before Ironsi, there were
No, was it Ironsi? Adakaboro was before 1966.
Yes, it was.
It wasn't. I think it was Balewa.
Balewa. So we never had this kind. And then, Ibadan is a very significant place in the history of Nigeria. Having that kind of event take place in Ibadan, however symbolic, should be taken very seriously, because whatever happens in Ibadan is like a thermometric reading of what is happening in Nigeria generally.
Perhaps they chose Ibadan because Ibadan is the center of Yoruba politics.
You can say that. It wasn't always the case. There was a time it was Akure.
Okay.
And then they moved to Ibadan. But I would like to think, again, that this particular development should get us thinking, and thinking very, very hard about what it means. You see, nobody flees from a good thing. That's natural law. If Nigeria was so nice to her citizens, I don't think everybody would want to leave. But the fact that everyone in some way, shape or form seems to be expressing the same intent tells us something. If there were to be a plebiscite in Nigeria today, or a referendum, what do we think the likely outcome will be? I mean, should we be concerned that this is the undercurrent that is running through our polity? Or should we think that these are lunatics who just woke up one day and decided that they were going to take over the state?
They've been referred to as lunatics in government quarters.
You see, the politics of naming when things like this happen is a highly studied subject. For example, if it were a religious group and they carried out this kind of act, they will say they are terrorists. Some will say they are on cheap drugs. In fact, an official of the state said they were on cheap drugs. But anyone who studied what happened before the invasion of the House of Assembly and after knows that there is history behind what happened. The fact that those who perpetrated this act were mostly young people should also get us worried. Our demography says that 70% of the Nigerian population is young people, only 30% old people. So if young people are doing this, we should really be worried. Young people should be caring about living lives that is rich and full of experience. But if they are saying they don't mind dying, then there's a problem. We should really look into it.
For them to have gotten the guts to invade the House of Assembly wanting to hoist the flag of their envisioned country, does it tell of young persons who are ready to die for their cause?
All over the world, it is the young people who do this kind of reckless things. I can speak to that fact now that I'm considered no longer young. I have gray hair now. But you will not find somebody in his 50s leading the charge in this kind of things.
But there are some of their leaders who
are
above 50.
I have a question about the credentials of those who call themselves the leaders of this kind of fringe movement. Because if you really understand how states work, you will know that even Sierra Leone, as weakened and as battered as it is, cannot be attacked the way they purported to attack the Nigerian state that day. So you really need to know what you're doing. You need to know where you stand regarding the entity you are confronting. Already, my reading of the situation is that these leaders, in quote, have this cannon fodder at their disposal, which is neither here nor there. We are talking specifically about the invasion of the Oyo State House of Assembly, but we all know that IPOB is about the same thing. Now the Middle Belt Forum is about the same thing. Now elements of different minority ethnicities in the Niger Delta are about the same thing. We will never know except we actually conduct a plebiscite in this country. It is just that somebody thought to be bold enough or reckless enough to do this. So we know there's something wrong.
The police is saying they were armed, so it was an armed uprising against the state.
Indeed, I would say this is symptomatic of the state of the world. Remember that event in America under Trump, where the insurrectionists, they were also armed. They went to the legislature to do this kind of thing also, to prevent a certain outcome. So you will see that it is not just Nigeria. It is actually a worldwide. In the US, they will say these are the rednecks. They don't want anything that is not in accordance with the old white established order of things.
And you see the way they were dressed. They were dressed in military uniform.
Indeed.
You could call them soldiers in their own right.
But we know that that the cloak does not make the monk. So the problem is actually the superficiality of these young people, however idealistic or misled they are. They really don't know the extent of the entity that they are trying to confront. If they knew, maybe they would take a different approach.
Are you sure they didn't know? They just wanted to make a symbolic move?
I think when you're young, you want to be known for something, especially if you feel that many people share this aspiration that you have. They've tested the waters, and according to their own perception, they feel that they should do something about it. You will see a divergence in the approach of some of the leaders of the Yoruba who say, well, we were never for separatist adventures. Because history shows that the Yoruba have been relating with their neighbors to the north, to the east, to the west for close to 1,000 years. Recorded history has shown that that was the case. We were trading horses with Hausa kingdoms. They were trading fish and all the rest with people from the east. They were trading human beings with people from the west. So we have a history of relating with others, with Nupe people for beads and things like that. So it's actually not natural. But if people feel that this arrangement is no longer paying us, then they will react the way those young people react.
Now let's come to Dukbe Onitiri. For the first time, a woman is leading the charge in her own right. What is the significance of that?
I don't know her, but I do know she was married to MKO Abiola. And I want to ask a question of you, my interlocutor, and our listeners. Do we really think that the Nigerian state has dealt fairly with MKO Abiola's family? If the answer is yes, then we should condemn this woman for leading the charge, however misguided it may be. But if the answer is no, then we should actually sit down and retrace our steps.
You know, I had the opportunity to have like a 3 hours discussion with her.
Indeed.
Yes, it should be about 9 years ago.
That's far back.
Yes, I went to her house somewhere in Ikeja in Lagos. I had an interview with her, a 45 minutes interview with her. But after the interview, I wanted to know more, you know. This time the mics were in the bag. So we sat down to talk. You know, I was able to see her pain, her notion of the state, you know. So when I was watching her in that broadcast, I began to reflect on that discussion. In fact, I went back to listen to the interview. I'm not surprised. I'm not.
Well, here is the thing. There is a difference, as Nigerians, especially from the Yoruba-speaking part of Nigeria, are finding out. There's a difference between Emilokan and Awalokan. And I would say that has ramifications for aspirations such as what we have just seen. As you have pointed out, we've not actively seen a woman lead the charge in this way before. If I were to advise those in charge in Nigeria, I would say be very careful. Because when you go through history, whether it is European history, Asian history, Latin American history, even African history, anytime a woman is involved, the temptation is to think that you can dismiss what you just witnessed as inconsequential. It will be a horrible mistake. That is the lesson of history. The Romans found out with Boudica in what we now call Britain. The Roman machine swept through Europe, went as far as Asia, in fact came to Africa. But one woman in Britain, which is in the heart of Europe, said, I think we have to put a stop to this thing. And she succeeded. So I would say that the Nigerian state needs to be very careful. Again, we saw what a woman did in the state of Israel. There has been no leader like Golda Meir since. There is a certain element that they bring that I am afraid the male figures don't have. It's one thing for a man to send his sons to war. It's quite a different thing for a woman to send her children to war.
What's the difference?
The difference is that men tend to be flippant about it. But women are never flippant about sending. They are the ones that bore the pains. They know. You know that the Yoruba culture, just like the Roman culture or the Greek culture, have certain similarities. One of those similarities is that before men go to war, they do something. They consult old, experienced women. Of course, they have different names for those women. Some people call them seers, some call them witches, whatever name you want to call it. But this is the practice in Greek culture. This is the practice in Roman culture. This is the practice in Yoruba culture. You know why? It goes back to that thing that a woman is likely to tell you the bold, plain truth. Are you going to succeed? She's going to tell you. Are you going to fail? She's going to tell you. And again, the biggest temptation is to say, nothing will come out of this.
You can see the way she's dressed here in white. You know, the calmness on her face. And declaring a state out of a state. And kept, yeah, what are you up to? Even when she had told us what she's up to. What is the power of a woman?
It goes back to what I just said. The temptation is always to dismiss this as some kind of fringe activity by somebody who does not know what she's doing. But again, history tells us that by the time a woman is involved, how many public demonstrations has been arranged in Nigeria, has been organized in Nigeria prior to EndSARS. You know what made EndSARS different?
What?
The number of young women involved in the planning and leadership of that particular movement. So for the first time, you had the New York Times put Nigerian protesters on its front page. They are able to network in ways that men and boys are not able to, because you don't know to whom they are connected. Like I said, if I were to be the one advising those in charge in Nigeria, I would say be very careful.
Now, this is a woman who married a rich man, one of the richest men in Africa.
She herself comes from a background of privilege.
The Oyo State Government has gone to demolish her house in Ibadan because the house, according to the government, was used for separatist activities. What do you think about that?
You see, this fire brigade approach to serious issues has to stop. If you destroy a building by a poor person, then you have inflicted damage, right? It will take a while. But if you do the same to a rich person, a wealthy person, you actually have done nothing other than to swing sympathy towards her, because a lot of Nigerians cannot afford to build a house of their own right now. So they put themselves in her shoes and say, ha. To those who went to execute that order, they want to show an example to the people that this is what will happen if we find you in the camp of sympathizers of this kind of movement. But in reality, what has simply happened is that a lot of people who will not come to commiserate with her openly are sympathizing with her position. And if before now they did not know who she was, they want to find out who she is. So again, this is a chance for the leadership, for the political leadership in Nigeria to show more brain than brawn. You can bring down a whole town. Some past heads of state in Nigeria have done that. But has that ever stopped anything from happening? No. And there's a reason why. The Yoruba people, remember, are known for how long they can hold a grievance. They fought a 30-year internecine war amongst themselves. 30 years. So this to them is really nothing.
From her brokers, she has committed treason, right?
The lawyers will say prima facie. On the face of it.
Okay.
On the face of it, a separatist declaration is treasonable. There are mechanics, there are elements of legality that are involved. I am no longer a player in that field. I used to be a prosecutor. I'm no longer a player in that field. And if the state wants, let them go ahead and do what they think the state should do. But if I were to advise, I would say proceed with an abundance of caution.
We are reflecting on what happened in Oyo State on Saturday. A group of Yoruba Nation agitators made headlines when they stormed the Oyo State House of Assembly in Agodi, Ibadan, donning military camouflage and attempting to assert control over the State House of Assembly by raising their flag on the premises. Their efforts, however, were met with resistance by security operatives who intervened to maintain order. Subsequently, 29 individuals comprising 5 women and 24 men were apprehended and presented before the Oyo State Magistrate Court in Iyagokun on Wednesday. The court, after hearing the case, ordered the remand of the agitators in prison custody. They faced charges on 7 counts, including treasonable felony, membership of an unlawful society, illegal possession of firearms, and conduct likely to cause a breach of peace. So we already know that those who were arrested are facing treasonable felony.
Indeed. This thing happened just about the same time as Bobrisky's arraignment, sentencing, and jail term. What a sociologist is likely to ask you is this question: why is the law being applied in case A, but not in case B, C, and D, even though all of them share the same set of facts? We know of many groups who have illegal weapons in their possession, who have declared openly that they don't want to be part of this country. But in this particular instance, we have quick action on the part of the government. They've been arrested, they've been arraigned, they're going to face trial. The question is, why is the same dynamics not at play? Some people brought down a military jet in this country.
They are terrorists.
They laid ambush for soldiers sent to rescue those in the plane.
They are bandits.
And up to now, nobody has been arraigned.
Because they are criminals. You can't get them.
Well,
they have machine guns.
I would say that what you're simply telling elements like this one is that instead of going with den guns and shotguns, they too should go and get military-grade weapons. So we really need to get serious about this question of applying the law evenly across board. There should be no sacred cows. I'm a lawyer by training. I want the law to be enforced because that is the only basis on which you can build a modern society. I was saying to you before the program started that we were colonized by people who were offspring of the Roman Empire. What that means is that they have a certain culture. One of it is that everything must conform to law. The second thing is that everything must be recorded. So here is the question for those in charge. Why is the law not being enforced in some cases? Why is it being enforced in some other cases, even though similar set of facts operate across board?
What happened in Ibadan on Saturday? Is it an embarrassment to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu?
I am not in a position to read his mind or to read the mind of the governor of Oyo State, Seyi Makinde. But if I were there, I would be worried. Why anyone should think that they should do that kind of thing in 2024. I would be worried. I would want to know why you feel so aggrieved that you want to upstage me and impose your own order. I would really like to know. The easy thing to do is to say, bring all of them to Agodi or to whichever prison you want to set out all of them on trial and punish them according to the law. But the more thoughtful thing to do, which is the more difficult thing to do, will be to say, actually, we want to know why you are doing this. Why you no longer want to be part of this thriving, flourishing country.
Addressing the issue, President Bola Tinubu, during a meeting with leaders of the Pan-Yoruba Socio-Political Organization, Afenifere, at the presidential villa in Abuja emphasized the government's resolve to uphold the unity of Nigeria. Tinubu says those seeking to undermine Nigeria's sovereignty will face the consequences, that they will bear the responsibility for their actions. Using his words, those who think they can threaten the sovereignty of Nigeria will have themselves to blame. They have a price to pay, and we are not going to relent. That's Tinubu there.
I am not surprised. Remember that before he was elected or emerged president, he did one thing. He went to a place called Chatham House in England to present himself as a candidate. And there is a history behind that. Actually, all the leading contenders at that time went to Chatham House.
But Atiku.
Except Atiku. There's a colonial history behind that, which says that you should bring together disparate nations and call them Nigeria, or according to Goldie's code word, Negretia. Mm-hmm. You should bring them together. Initially, Nigeria was actually called a company, according to this book, the biography of Lugard by Marjorie Perham.
Yeah.
It was literally called the company, not the country.
Yes.
The company. So, why did England want such a large territory for a company? Because at that time, we were the ones supplying the palm oil. We were the ones supplying the rubber. We were the ones supplying so many things, tin, timber, up till today as we speak. That underground train system in London, the tube, has places where they will write Sapele wood. So they did that, and I don't blame them. If I were in their position, I would do the same thing. Because, self-interest is paramount in these things. However, we, having now gotten independence, have a duty to ask ourselves, on what basis do we want to be one as a country? Do we want the unity of horse and rider? Or do we want the egalitarian unity of equals? Because what has happened in Nigeria is that it has never been a unity of equals. It has always been a variety of horse and rider today, mule and rider tomorrow, and so on and so forth. If the order that the state wants to preserve is the equal order, I'm all for it. In fact, I would say let us even proceed further to say let's have one African state. Not just Nigeria, not just ECOWAS. Let's have one state that is Africa. Because let us face the fact, we are behind. The whole world is so far ahead of us. Europe, America, Asia, they are ahead of us. And we know that unity is strength. But before there can be durable union, there has to be justice.
But Tinubu is ready to defend this union.
I am saying that if I were in a position to advise the state in this matter, I would say, let us look at the underlying factors. What is it that made Adaka Boro take up arms against the Nigerian state? Why did Gideon Oka decide that at some point he was going to excise a portion of Nigeria so that it's no longer Nigeria? Why are those young people so intent on a separatist agenda to the extent that they presented themselves in person without face masks? You know that in Ibadan there was the mystery gunman.
Yeah.
Yes. But these ones, they went during daytime and in fact had a face-off with armed officials of the state. Why? I would think that is actually a more durable solution to our problems. You've been outside Nigeria many times. You know how it is at each embassy when you are seeking a visa. It was not always the case. In fact, I am old enough to say that there was a time if you wanted to go to Canada or the US or Britain, you get to the airport, you buy your ticket and you flew, and you paid when you paid your visa fees when you landed. But now, it is like passing through the eye of the needle.
It can be humiliating sometimes.
That is the reason why, whether they declare it openly or not, so many of the 70% that we have that are young people in this country feel that there has to be another way that we should proceed, not this union.
Can we say that Banji Akintoye has lit a fire that will burn for a long time? Immediately the separatists invaded the House of Assembly, he came out to denounce their move. Has it gone beyond him?
It's interesting you ask this question because Professor Akintoye has always maintained that his own movement will achieve its objectives through peaceful means alone. At any rate, he's in his 80s now. I don't think he's in a position to be holding Kalashnikov rifles. So from the beginning, he was clear that he will be peaceful. He will not have a hand in any armed insurgency or lead anyone to do so. So coming out now to say the Yoruba Nation that he is a part of is not the armed and insurgent type, is actually in character. It is consistent with what we know him for. But the truth of the matter is that when you say Yoruba Nation, the young people are also part of that nation. And the demographics, according to the Nigerian Identity Management Commission, is that 70% of this population is young, in fact below the age of 20. So, you see, the old have an edge because they have experience. That generation has witnessed a war. They know it is not nice. You know, before October 7 of 2023, Gaza actually had higher living standards than Nigeria. In fact, Nigerians were going to Gaza as refugees. Today, less than 9 months afterward, their position is worse than Nigeria. Why? Because there's war there. So, people like Professor Akintoye, the older generation, they have seen war. They know it is not pretty. They know that it can reverse all the progress you have made for hundreds of years. So they say, no, we don't want this. But at the same time, they are not the only ones. In fact, they are in the minority. The majority, the young people who have no experience, who have no real concept of a state and how it should run, are saying we are tired of being pariahs. We are tired of being disempowered. We are tired of being outcast. We are tired of being humiliated each time we want to even leave this country. Why don't we have a state of our own that we can be proud of? That really is the issue.
The Yoruba people that Professor Banji Akintoye described in this book are evolving by the day. And part of that evolution is what was witnessed in Ibadan on Saturday. In this book, the leader of Yoruba Nation, in this case, the Yoruba Nation fighting for a state of Oduduwa, Professor Banji Akintoye, a professor of history, has written a book about the Yoruba people. This is one of the best books you can find on the Yoruba people. To understand what is going on here is to understand the history, culture, and political development of the Yoruba people. You have a big book here that has been written by a professor who understands the past, the present, and what the future will be like. So I recommend this book to you. You can get this book on udarabooks.com. udarabooks.com. Remember, the discourse we are having this afternoon is centered on the Yoruba people. Self-determination in Yorubaland. So get this book on udarabooks.com. You can also get them through our WhatsApp numbers. The numbers are on the screen. Send us a WhatsApp message telling us you are interested in the book, and you will get your copy. It's a big book. How many pages are we looking at? Hey, but you will enjoy reading it. It's like a novel. Somebody telling a story. 821 pages.
Wow.
It's a big book. And Baba wrote this book. This book was published in 2022. It's even a recent work.
It's a recent work.
At that age, Baba is still writing. An intellectual, now facing arms uprising. Perhaps by some young persons he motivated to follow that path.
I don't really think the crowd that invaded the House of Assembly in Ibadan are the same crowd that Professor Banji Akitoye has in mind or has in his inner circle. I think actually what has happened is that impatience has begun to set in.
You know, when you start it sometimes, you don't know where it will end.
You don't.
You will inspire some people to define it in their own ways.
You will. See, Edmond, you have done a great thing. You have established a platform to be discussing real-time politics, not just in the Southwest, in Nigeria, and I think in Africa. But I think that you can go one step further.
Okay.
By inviting eggheads from the classics department at the University of Ibadan.
Okay.
Because actually Ibadan is the only place where they study classics. And the reason why I'm encouraging you to do this is because classics is really the study of states, how it really works. You can invite us lawyers and poets.
Okay.
But I can tell you without any equivocation that Nigeria is not running according to law. It's called a federal republic. I have said it on your program many times. It is neither federal nor a republic. So really, why is there that kind of dissonance even in the very description of this entity that we are running? The classicists will be able to help us out. You have said something now about unintended consequences of actions or initiatives. I am hoping that the Nigerian state, the leadership, uses this opportunity to revisit many pending and burning issues, including that of the unlawful incarceration of Nnamdi Kanu. The reason why I say so is this.
Did you say unlawful?
Yes, because the Nigerian courts have pronounced. And the Nigerian state has refused to take to the pronouncement of the court. I feel pained as a lawyer that is happening. Because again, once you have a state in which the law or whatever judges say does not really count, then you are actually inviting anarchy and anomy. Professor Wole Soyinka wrote a book many years back, about 50 years ago, called State of Anomy. At that time, it was not even this manifest. Today, it is manifest. The government says we have brought down the price of petrol. That is when the pump price at the pumps is increasing. The government says we are prosecuting this person because he or she mutilated the naira. But there are 1,000 with evidence to prove that they are doing even worse to the naira, but they are not being prosecuted, and so on and so forth. So I am hoping that those in charge have the presence of mind to call themselves to order to say, wait a minute, this thing is getting too frequent. There's something that safety specialists call the pyramid of accidents. It starts slowly at the base. But as you move to the top, you will get to the tipping point. And from that point, you don't know to which side you are going to fall. So you need to be careful.
Perhaps as a political scientist, perhaps I saw what happened on Saturday before it happened.
It's predictable.
Because if you read books, even written by some of our old leaders, even if you read Awolowo, you would see ethnic definitions in his proposals. If you read Sir Olaniwun Ajayi, consistently he's breaking it down.
Olaniwun Ajayi particularly.
Now, I want to read from a part of Olaniwun Ajayi's book, but let's hear the voice of the Baba. He is no more. You know, I was with him in 2016.
You've done some work. Oh.
You know, we're talking about the Nigerian state. You know, he kept seeing what happened on Saturday. He kept talking about it, using Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia example. Let's recall that moment.
Yugoslavia has about 6 or 8 different nationalities, just as Nigeria has. And Yugoslavian people have been clamoring for self-determination, each nation in Yugoslavia. And their leaders have said, no, the more the merrier, let us all go together. Over the years, centuries,
But
the last of
Bronze
them,
Tito was able to keep them.
listen to me. The last of them was Joseph Tito. Joseph Tito was an army man, a general. Said, my people, I'm sorry, I can't allow us to give self-determination to each of this nationality. We should go together. In any case, he died. When he died, then the people got together, they held a meeting, 1, 2, 3, they all failed. In any case, what did you get? Because they were not allowed to go their separate ways. What did you get? Since 1989, they started to kill one another, and they killed one another for 10 years. The last of their leaders was arrested about 3 or 4 years ago. That was the last one. Is now undergoing trial in Hague. So that is the sort of thing we are trying to avoid. Nigeria is not a country. Nigeria consists of so many nations, leading nations. The sea geopolitical zone, let them go in their separate way. You will see marvelously rapid development. Look at Czechoslovakia. And, Czechoslovakia was like Yugoslavia. Czechoslovakia consisted of Czechs and Slovaks. They were together for centuries. But Slovaks never liked the union for a long time. So they wanted to pull out. So they went to their parliament and passed a resolution that they should get out of the union. Then they went out and prevailed on the Czechs to pass similar resolutions. And the Czechs agreed. The Czechs passed similar resolution, and then they called a meeting of both sides. Then they shook each other's hand, Slovaks and Czechs, and everybody, each went its way. So Czechs is very happy, making progress. Slovak, well, not unhappy, because they are not as wealthy as good. as rich as the Czechs. But they too, they are managing their affairs, they are carrying on, except corruption is there.
Are you saying we should not take for granted the recent agitation by some young men in the eastern part of the country, the Nnamdi Kanus of this world?
Look, if I were in charge in this country, I will call them to a table and discuss with them.
If I were in charge, I will call them to a table. That was in 2016.
Wow. I am jealous of you, Edmund, because you sort of saw these things your own way, and you sort of knew who to talk to. And you see, the advantage or the opportunity that old age gives us is that it allows us to know precisely how to think about phenomena, about what we see before us. Chief Awolowo, who was like contemporaries with Sir Olaniyan Ajayi, had the same views. We cannot discount what they have seen. By the way, Sir Ahmadu Bello also said the same thing. Everybody that has really thought deeply about the situation of Nigeria has come to the same conclusion. All of them, eventually, when they get to power, they say the same thing, they mouth the same mantra to say, to keep Nigeria one is a task that must be done. But I want to call your attention to something that happened recently.
Okay.
Just before this episode at Government House in Ibadan, when General Gowon was asked to come and speak and address the country. You could see a man who now realizes that he may not have done the right thing as a young person. You could see a man who refused to be pushed to say certain things. You could see a man who, with the wisdom of hindsight, the benefit of hindsight, wished things were done a little differently. Because now you could see a man who occupied the position of Caesar at some point, but who now has to render to another Caesar today. In order for us not to be going around in circles, is it not better for us to face the situation as frankly and as frontally as we should? Are we not educated enough? Do we not have enough leaders, thought leaders, to help us navigate these things? We do. What is the problem? The problem is that Nigeria became a rent-seeking state. So that anybody that climbs to the top of the pyramid, occupies the center, determines how much rent goes where. But we are saying that it is time to save the golden goose that lays the golden egg. Because if that goose is allowed to die, there will be no egg for anybody to keep or sell in tomorrow's market day. That is where we are right now.
Let's read from Sir Olaniyan's book, one of his books, Nigeria, Africa's Failed Assert. This is another of Olaniyan Ajayi's book. This house of Oduduwa must not fall. Is the house about to fall? We will come to this. So this is the book I want to read from. Classic. Most of the materials used for this book are primary materials. On page 60, he says, Egbe Omo Oduduwa submitted the following suggestion during the 1950 Ibadan Constitutional Conference. We advocate the grouping of Nigeria into various autonomous states or regions purely on ethnical basis. Experience of other countries show that the basis is more natural and invariably more satisfactory than any other basis. Egbe Omo Oduduwa continues, for this reason, we urge that the Yoruba-speaking people in northern region and the Igbo-speaking people in the western region should be grouped respectively with the western and eastern region. Where necessary, a plebiscite may be conducted to ascertain the wishes of the people concerned. The Egbe continues, we advocate ethnical grouping only as the ultimate objective. We realize that if this basis is strictly adhered to at present throughout the country, some states would emerge which will be totally incapable of finding money to run their own affairs. We consider it desirable, therefore, that for the time being, such ethnical groups as are unable financially to maintain their own separate states should be amalgamated with other larger and neighboring groups until they are able to maintain their own separate autonomous state. Such smaller ethnic groups should be free to decide which larger groups they are willing to be temporarily amalgamated. What do you think?
I like the proposal. I don't like the word amalgamate or amalgamation because it's borrowed from metallurgy, from material science. You can amalgamate 2 metals, 3 metals, at most 4 metals. But by the time you are trying to amalgamate 10 different metals, then you are really asking for problems. So there are limits to these things. However, the principle, the core principle of organization of states remains the same, true. I think America is the only country that has tried to buck that trend, to say it doesn't matter whether you're black or white. If you are born here or if you naturalize, you are American and we're going to take you as such. But in America, the rule of law is by far the most important rule. In fact, when you join the military in America, whether as the Army, the Marines, Air Force, you swear to their constitution to uphold it. We know that that is on the face of it what we do here. But we also know that people actually bear allegiance to their ethnic roots over here, whether they sing the national anthem and say the pledge or not.
So these men saw it. They knew it.
They knew it. Nobody who is old enough to vote in Nigeria can claim not to know it. If you subject Nigeria to a plebiscite today, you will have about 30 different countries. Imagine. If you leave Nigerians to freely exercise their own free will, you will have that many countries. So what we are saying is that we can pretend that it doesn't matter. We can pretend that this arrangement will work. But there is something called an involution. Not a revolution, an involution. The womb can stretch and stretch and stretch to accommodate a growing baby for so long. But you know, by the time that womb reaches the elastic limit and the baby still refuses to come out, then you have to call the surgeon to come and do a Caesar section, or what they call a cesarean section, so that you can save the life of the mother. Nigeria is at that point now where we have to decide whether we have to call in the surgeon or not. We have enterprising people. Nigerians are not the problem. Nigerians are, look, I was in this museum in Michigan, in Detroit, Michigan, and I saw artworks, purportedly Ijaw artworks, that featured ironworks from Nok civilization, the first set of artifacts to be taken out of Yorubaland to America. And when I got back to Nigeria, I asked older Ijaw people, I asked Professor J.P. Clark, I said, I saw this thing in this museum. And Professor Clark said, yes, our people have been trading across the river Niger up to the Nok country for centuries. The same thing here. The same thing with the Niger Delta. So the Nigerians are not the problem. They understand each other. They trade with each other. They have been trading with, they have been intermarrying. This weekend, today is Friday, on this afternoon, there will be thousands of intermarriages across ethnic lines in Nigeria this weekend. It's happening as we speak. So that is not the problem. Nigerians are not the problem.
But it was a problem in Lagos during the last election.
It was a manufactured problem. Because, as I said, even in Lagos, they can't help it, even if they want to. Even in Lagos this weekend, there will be intermarriages across ethnic lines happening as we speak, despite the fact that they went at each other before the elections. I mean, I don't want to be specific now, but even the son of the president married outside the so-called ethnic bounds. So what we are saying is that in a city, in an evolving modern state, where you have the cosmopolis, where you have the metropolis, you cannot help it. You cannot ask your young people only marry from within your own group. It's not going to work.
But why are they now calling for separatism?
Because, as I said, nobody flees from a good thing. Nigerians are not the problem. Nigeria, as presently constituted, has shown that it is the problem. Why? Because the constitution does not work. And the last thing holding Nigeria to the economy does not work. The health system does not work. The last thing that is holding Nigeria together is the social fabric. These intermarriages. Your name is Edmond Obilo. You are one of the most respected broadcast journalists in this country. But you are not in your village. You are in Ibadan doing your thing. You can move to New York. You can move to Abuja. People have begun to realize that it is actually not your ethnicity that counts. It's the amount of skill. Before the invasion of the British, the Benins understood this principle. So that they invited you, if you are a skilled smith, from wherever you are coming from, to come to Benin and set up shop. If your craft is making beads and you are a beader person, you are a no-pay person, come to Benin. Just pay a certain portion to the king. The Benins understood it. So that when the Portuguese arrived, they said, so these people are disorganized. If your job, if you can run very well, they gave you a job to light all the lamps in Benin at night so that there will be no darkness. Look at how organized it was 300 years ago. But go to Benin today, erosion has practically cut the place into half. So we are saying that Nigerians, the people, look at what Nigerians do when they go abroad, when they get to Harvard, I read an article, I'm going to send it to you. In the 60s, straight A Africans, Time magazine, no less, not one mushroom American publication. Time magazine did a survey of straight A students in America. And guess what? They found that Nigerians were 60%. of the Africans that were doing wonderful things back then. Those people have not changed. They are still producing excellence. But the question is, why is it not happening on home soil? Why do we feel that we need to go abroad? It's like the Iranian situation. You see Iranians in MIT, in Harvard, doing fantastic projects. But can they do it at home? No. That is the problem.
In Olaniwu's other book, This House of Oduduwa Must Not Fall, I have read from this, Nigeria, Africa's Failed Assert. You get this on udarabooks.com. You also get this on udarabooks.com. He quoted Tafawa Balewa. In a discussion at the Legislative Council in 1948, Olaniwu said Balewa made the statement. Balewa continues, this is wrong. I am sorry to say that this presence of unity is artificial and it ends outside this chamber.
That is the truth. We don't like it. We want to pretend it didn't happen, but that is the truth. By the way, that is not the only time Sir Tafawa Balewa, uttered those sentiments, and other leaders from across the country. Zik, by the way, was the only one who said, let us forget our differences. And quickly, his contemporaries corrected him and said, we cannot forget our differences. Let us find another way to develop at our own different pace. Something happened, and this has nothing to do with the invasion of the House of Assembly. Something happened in Saudi Arabia this last week. A Nigerian lady went there and was making TikTok videos. And you could see two different kinds of reactions. People from her own part of the country were hailing her and say, yes, you are representing us very well. But people from the north who believe that they are custodians of Islam said, no, you don't do this in Saudi Arabia. You don't dance to in front of a mosque. You don't. It's a no-no for them. And you wonder, how did these two different attitudes end up in the same space? Let us understand that we cannot develop at the same pace. That's the truth. But let us make a foundation by law that is applied across board. You see, I think it is too easy to say, let each ethnicity become a separate country. Because we know from our history that even that does not solve the problem. Because if you do that, the Yorubas have shown that the Ifes and the Ekitis will go at each other, the Ijebus and the Oyos will go at each other, and so on and so forth. In the East, the same story. In the North, the same story. But let us at least have a basis that can allow us by law to optimize our potentials. There is enough bitumen in Ondo State to provide good roads for Nigeria and West Africa. Enough bitumen. But nobody dares go in there to say, I want to start this business, because the laws, hold everybody captive. I was speaking to Nigeria's oldest paleontologist, Professor Sylvester Adegoke, who was one of the pioneers of the discovery. And he was not a very happy man that 50 years after the discoveries have been made, we are still looking at it. We are still inviting people to come and look at it. In his heydays, the Department of Geology that he ran had over 30 geologists, and they have different discoveries across this country. And we have not even utilized 1% of their, apart from the oil and gas. We have not utilized.
It's not an awakened nation.
We are sleeping.
Is it a nation?
No, it's a country. And there's a difference.
Are you sure it's not a nation?
It's not a nation.
We exist together.
See, a country is a geographical concept. You can say it starts latitude this up to longitude that. And that's precisely, and I'm quoting them literally, that's what the British had in mind. They said, north of the 9th parallel. That's what Lugard said. And I'm not making this up. It's actually...
You have a book there. Can you show us the book?
Yes, this is...
And take us into this book. I've been looking for this book.
Yes, this is a very rare book. This is Lugard, The Years of Authority by Marjorie Perham. Marjorie Perham was the official biographer. And she did a fantastic work in documenting every aspect of not just Lugard's life, but of the correspondences between the Home Office in London and what was happening in Nigeria. So you have records of what Goldie did, what the Africa UAC did. You have all those things in this book. I can say that you are the one that made me bring out this book, because I normally will not bring it out. So in this book, Lugard said, north of the 9th parallel. The 9th parallel starts around Lokoja. It's a different country. South of the 9th parallel is a different country. But Britain wanted the two together because they were afraid that they might have to go to war with France, so that they can have more people to fight France. See what Europeans do. When it is time to fight and kill each other, they know how to borrow our blood so that they can fight their wars. But it didn't happen. Britain never really went to war with France on that score. But the idea of amalgamation did not end. By the time they were actually going to now do the amalgamation in 1914, they had realized that even two administrations will not do. They needed more. But for administrative ease, that is, for the ease of the UK, who did not have enough people, soldiers, turned to statesmen to come down and operate, they said, let us just keep it as one. We know ourselves. We know that we don't hate our fellow Nigerians. But what happens with Nigeria as presently constituted, which is a country and not yet a nation, is that whoever is in charge, whoever is in power, feels that there is no need to re-examine the foundations. But we must re-examine the foundations because it is faulty and the house is beginning to tilt. It is tilting worse than the Tower of Pisa in Italy. We have to do serious engineering. We have to do serious soul searching. Those who have been wronged need to be we need to tender apologies, to say we are sorry. We did this to each other. We ought not to have done this to each other. See, all this marrying that we do of ourselves across is good. I mean, that's why we are so strong. That's why we are so vibrant. You see, you see Giannis Adetokunbo in America playing basketball, and there's nobody that is like him. He's huge, he's big and strong and powerful and everything. That's what happens when you bring Nigerian genes together in one pool. But again, the problem is not the Nigerians. The Nigerians are good. The problem is Nigeria. To make a nation is a spiritual quest. It's a quest that has to do with the meeting of minds. We have to agree that I am not superior to you, you are not superior to me. We are equal. You have your strengths. You are the questioner. I answer. If we switch positions now, I will make a very bad interlocutor. But you do it naturally. So we need to come to that point to say, I am old enough to realize that there was a time in this country that we had players in the national team, the Okala brothers. You know, they were from Benue. You know that? We had a national team that was truly national. And we had a track team. We had all kinds of teams. And you saw that we had promise. It's no longer the case. We can get to that point. But we have to lay the playing field. And it has to be level.
Tade Ipadeola, I call him the lecturer in the class today. The class of politics, history, and power. So he has been speaking. You can also make your intervention. He's a lawyer. I describe him as a deep thinker. He wrote a collection of poems, the Sahara Testament. And this poem won a big prize in Nigeria. He is the author of the Sahara Testament, winner of the Delphic Laurel in poetry. He's speaking his mind. So in a class, we read books. That is why we recommend books to you. We talk about books. Within books, you will find the secret of nations. Because from time immemorial, deep thinkers have been writing. Are we reading? I have recommended 3 books to you so far. The first is this one, The Yoruba Nation, the Yoruba people, profile of the foremost black nation, written by Professor Banji Akintoye. Great book. I have also recommended This House of Oduduwa Must Not Fall by Sir Olaniwun Ajayi. Great writer, deep thinker, a political philosopher, an Awoist. He's also the author of this book, Nigeria, Africa's Failed Assert. You'll find these books on udarabooks.com, udarabooks.com, or you contact us on Udara Books WhatsApp number. Remember, Udara Books is also State Affairs, just different names. Udara Books is under Bificom Media and Systems. State Affairs is managed by Bificom Media and Systems. So, it's an integrated system. So you can contact us on WhatsApp to get these books. I have more books to recommend to you. Another book you should read on the Nigerian question is this one by Toyin Falola, a professor of history, Understanding Modern Nigeria, Ethnicity, Democracy, and Development. Understanding Modern Nigeria, Ethnicity, Democracy, and Development. This is a recent publication. A deep study of ethnicity in Nigeria. A deep research on development and democracy. The professor took his time. Abiodun Alao, professor of African Studies, King's College, describes the book in this way. He says, another great book from one of Nigeria's finest scholars. Falola has brought together under one cover answers to all the questions anyone may want to ask about Nigeria, but have never been able to frame up in a question. He says this book will put us in Falola's debt for quite a long time. I agree with him because I have read the book and the book is so impactful. So get your copy on udarabooks.com. Another book that will open you to the crisis of the Nigerian state is The Untold Story of the Nigerian Biafran War. I keep bringing this book to you because I know it will help your understanding of where we are coming from. It's like a diary of events leading to the Civil War, events during the Civil War, and events after the Civil War. The issues that led to the Civil War are still the issues we are talking about in 2024. So in this diary, that is why it's called a chronological reconstruction of the events and circumstances of the Nigerian Civil War, written by Dr. Luke Nnaemeka Aneke. The foreword was written by General Philip F. Young when Ojukwu left Biafra towards the end of the war. Philip F. Young was his deputy. He took control of Biafra. So he handed that instrument of surrender to Olusegun Obasanjo. And after that, the war was brought to an end. This work is for students of history, for politicians, for anyone interested in Nigeria and Africa. You will find stories written by New York Times, some of the best news agencies in the world. You will find those stories here. There's this story I want to read some part to you. On page 532, Sunday, August 31st, 1969. Biafrans express outrage at Zeke's move. So let me read it to you why you should have this book. The author says Biafrans have reacted with shock and outrage to the news that Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, one of their past political heroes, had criticized their fight for independence. Fool, they shouted. Scoundrel, they called Zeke, was the cry in the palm wine bars in this provisional Biafra capital of Owerri. Soldiers hitchhiking along the market roads expressed bewilderment at Dr. Azikiwe's view, which was also denounced by the Biafran government. Zeke's pronouncement, made known in Biafra by outside radio stations, were severely critical of the Biafran government, which is led by General Ojukwu. The government replied with a statement broadcast over the radio Biafra and sent to Biafran representatives abroad. It said, Dr. Azikiwe had been taking money from British oil men and that he always ends a crisis by sacrificing the people's interest once he had found a personal accommodation. This is Biafra taking on Azikiwe. You see, this is a story you don't just find in any book. It continues. It recalled that Dr. Azikiwe had previously been an advisor to General Ojukwu and a Biafran spokesman abroad, and had even composed the Biafran national anthem. You see, did you know that Azikiwe composed the Biafran national anthem at any point? Land of the rising sun, or we shall perish. The Biafran government repeated past statement that Dr. Azikiwe had acted on his own, not at Biafra's behest. In meetings recently with Major General Gowon, Nigeria head of state, the point I'm making by reading this book is that you will find interesting stories that will broaden your understanding of the Nigerian crisis, personalities, the role they played. You know, at some point, Azikiwe had no option but to support Biafra. At other points, Biafrans began to suspect him that he was not fully into the war. So towards the end of the war, perhaps he saw that Biafra wasn't going to win. So he began to take on Ojukwu and others. If you read this book, you will see different sides of the story. Tade Ipadeola, what's the power in reading political books?
Well, you see, a book is smarter than any one of us. Because it is a knowledge-bearing object that lives beyond the span of normal lives. Let's say you live to be 100. This account of Lugard goes from the 1800s, and I'm reading it to you. I wish I could read just one portion.
Yes, go ahead.
Just one portion.
It's a class, so we read.
To buttress the point I was making about the origins that they don't teach us in Nigerian schools. You know, it's one thing for the colonizer not to teach you his own methods, but it's another thing for you, having supposedly gotten your freedom and independence, not to examine how you became colonized in the first place. So, this is the report of the Niger Committee. It was still the Niger Committee at that time, dealing with the company called Nigeria. On August 4, 1898, they recommended the amalgamation as an ultimate aim, but advised in favor of two governments, a maritime province and a Sudan province. The first to the south, based in Lagos, and the second in the north of the 9th parallel, with the capital in Lokoja. The first reason they gave for not appointing a single governor general over the whole region is the interesting one, always much emphasized by Goldie, that under the bad conditions for health, only a young person could do the work efficiently in West Africa. And even he would have to be away from his post for 1/3 of the time. They advised an amalgamation of military forces in Nigeria, and preferably in all of West Africa, under one commandant, normally resident in England. But this is the most interesting part. The government, Lugard told Willox, was unwilling to act, however, until after the ratification of the Niger Convention by France. And the Fashoda crisis had, of course, thrown that into suspense. What was the Fashoda crisis? The Fashoda crisis was the crisis up north in the Nile Delta. Remember, Europe wanted a shortcut to trade with Africa. So they needed the Suez Canal. At that time, it was not yet built. And they wanted control. France was there. Britain was there in Egypt. They had chased out the Turkish. They wanted to be... But they needed bodies. They needed bodies to fight. And they didn't want to use their own bodies. They needed black bodies. So they came to Nigeria. So bringing Nigeria together, apart from trade, was to supply bodies to fight their own war.
And they eventually also supplied those bodies, the West African Frontier Force.
During the First World War and the Second World War. So, really, you mentioned the position of Zik in this Nigeria Biafra crisis. The problem is that the thought leaders tend to get relegated anytime young people with guns move to the forefront. The young people think that power flows from the barrel of gun, as Mao Zedong said.
Is it not true?
No, it is not. We know that even what Mao Zedong tried to do in China has long been, superseded by superior ideas. Now China conquers the world not through guns, but through the technology they have embraced. If we took stock in this room...
The Mao people came to power.
Yes, they did.
Through the barrels of the gun.
They came to power, but they did not retain power through the...
But they have attained power with gun.
By the way, they had that power behind the bamboo curtain for so long. Mm-hmm. And they would have remained backwaters. Maybe I should say this now, that we are discussing Africa relative to all these other territories. Up to 1986, Nigeria had greater GDP than China. Can you believe that? up to 1986, the GDP of Nigeria was greater than the GDP of China. I remember very well that in primary school, the only thing we saw from China were pencils and ink pens. That was the only thing they sold to us. If we took stock right now, right here in this room, of how many high technological items have come from China to us, maybe we will not leave this place today, because from the mics to the computers, they have so improved so much. That did not come through the barrel of the gun.
Yeah.
That came through a rewiring, a re-engineering of how the Chinese saw themselves relative to the world. They suddenly realized that if we are going to, really take over, we don't have enough boots on the ground. We don't have enough Kalashnikovs. As a matter of fact, I think China still has one of the largest armies in the world, but it's not enough to even police China, not to talk. But through the products, low, mid, and high technology products that they send throughout the world, they have conquered. Everybody knows this, including the USA, which is number one now. They know that it's a question of time before the whole world becomes beholden to China. Why? Because China is supplying the things that the world needs in this technological.
It's the power of the mind.
It's the power of the mind.
You can join the discourse. Call our line. WhatsApp calls. So just call. The number is on the screen. You call 080 18449. Are you enjoying the class of politics and power? On YouTube, I can see Mao Pego Guni says he's enjoying the program and he's watching us from Southampton,
Wow.
in the United Kingdom. Igini Alex says happy to attend today's class. I'm listening from Dakar, Senegal.
Wow.
Timmy Moses says great to be here again and greetings to the radio man and the knowledgeable guests in the studio. The problem of Nigeria is the Nigerian constitution and not the Nigerian. Ochuko Elemo is watching from Canada. He says, another wonderful class. This class is a fundamental course for every Nigerian, he says. Okay, let's look at more messages from Facebook. Remember, the line is open. Call. I'm ready to pick your call. Let's hear from you. We'll be signing out at 4 p.m. so you have more time. You have more time. The program is State Affairs. Let's listen to Professor Adekonye, and we'll be back.
We need change. But can a change take place in the context of the state, the Nigerian state we are currently running? I submit, the Nigerian state is overburdened. Overburdened and therefore has become parasitic. In league with a class that cannot produce results. We don't have a class which Singapore has with interest in development. We have a class that has taken over the Nigerian state overburdened, parasitic. Now, until we move out of this overburdened state. Look at the list of functions which the federal government has. Look at the sizable amount from oil that services Abuja. You can produce the cocoa boom, the granite boom of those years unless you restructure the Nigerian state. Get the federal government stripped of considerable list of functions and physical powers it has, devolve these powers to state and local level. Free the state of a parasitic class. If we don't do that, we'll be doing what the economists used to do in the past. You plan and leave out the political. Can a government that benefits from a centralized system increase initiative? It can't. It's not possible. So, even though the current government doesn't like this, it sees this as a partisan political thing, there's a need to restructure and move away from the centralized state formats. Get the states empowered, get local government empowered. If we don't do that, we vote somebody into power, he's captured by the state, and he runs that agenda. My worry is that we wake up one morning and discover the Nigerian state is gone.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Yes, that's Professor Adekonye in 2016. We have a caller on the line. He has been waiting. Hello.
Yeah, hello, Radio Man. Good morning, sir.
Yes, we greet you from here.
Yeah, I'm calling. My name is Lannister. I'm calling from New York City.
Okay.
I was trying to share. I saw your Twitter X page now, so I was trying to reshare. And thank you for this morning class. You know, this is a class of history now, so it's a section. We don't have to miss this class. So thank you for your unbiased, your professionalism, your articulation. I have to acknowledge that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And also thank you to the guest too for his legal. The knowledge of history. I'm happy when I see people like you. For some of us coming up, it's hope. It's a strong hope for us. Yes, that we are on the right track. So thank you very much, sir. Good morning, sirs, to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just to quickly brush through what we have talked about. There was a Chinua Achebe article where it talked about when, as a 16th century, it was comparing the Benin Kingdom as almost the same equivalent to Brussels in Belgium, the same structure, the same demograph as at 16th or 17th century. I remember coming across that article from Chinua Achebe before the invasion of the British. And so when the guest mentioned about the 1986 China and Nigeria, it kind of just triggered that memory. We see Sir Agodi. We talked earlier about Sir Agodi. Sir Agodi did a very damage to Nigeria. It's not even Lugard. Lugard was just coming to prolong the British rule systems, but Agodi was the one who commercialized Nigeria. So, but unfortunately, years later, even Nigerians, the political class, the average, even the people, society, we are here to learn, and they need to really be a lot of unlearning, that needs to go on. When I see how Nigeria celebrates people like General Obasanjo today, I laugh. I said, like I mentioned earlier, in 1979, Obasanjo handed over to a Fulani Caliphate. in 2007 to the Fulani Caliphate, those stigma kind of, it's like a coronation, giving power back to the North. So for me, I've understand the North, the thing between the North and the South. I've always understand that. But back to the topic, because what happened on Saturday is that, and this is where I think, especially people who are agitating for restructuring, there need to be a lot of engagements, social constructs that they need to be. There is no proper. I think that's the mistake I feel someone like Kanu is even doing. Nnamdi Kanu is somebody I respect so much. I know his style may be hard, but there is a lot of meaning to his message, and I really appreciate what the president have done, President Tinubu, because if you look under Buhari, when Kanu comes to court, police are always everywhere. But for the first time, you see him addressing media. There's a sign of, I know what is already going on. There are things I won't say, but those message, sometimes leave the message. There are some message. Nigeria is a nation under many nations, and that's why I'm not even happy with the obedience movement, because I think certain lines were crossed. The South, the West, and the East are not enemies. They are not. But they have refused to understand power dynamic. And that is why this divide and rule, divide and conquest, the younger generation, and they are inheriting it, and they are still going ahead of it. So we still need more of this class of history. There need to be a lot of engagements, especially around that restructuring. There need to be more awareness.
All right.
There needs to be more conversation that needs to be heard.
Thank you.
More dialogue. Until we get to that stage, sir. Yeah, that's just my contribution, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate your contribution. Thank you. Yes, he called from New York. You can join the discourse. Call 080-309-18449. Of course, if you're out of the country, you have to add +234. Let's hear from you. My guest is Tade Ipadeola. He's the lecturer in the class today. We are talking history, politics, and power. Tade Ipadeola is a poet, a lawyer. In 2013, his poetry collection, The Sahara Testament, won the prestigious Nigeria Prize for Literature, instituted by the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas. So I'm talking about a man who has seen and have read a lot. Hello.
Good afternoon, Radio One.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, my name is David, and I'm calling from Lagos.
All right, David.
Yes, thank you so much once again for the program. Ever since I got your platform, I believe that I've been enrolled into a university that I'm probably never going to graduate from. So because everything from A to Z to the people that you are bringing in, the guests, they are all loaded with information that will make me to stop working and listening to it for 2 hours. So my 2 hours of listening to this program is not wasted at all.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. Yeah, in the view of what happened in Ibadan last week, Saturday, maybe you can help us to ask the guests to shed more light to it, because I believe that a kind of ideology has been created. If you refuse to do the needful, if the Nigerian people refuse to do the needful, eventually I will not want Nigeria to go anywhere in Yugoslavia that you enumerated earlier on. Why can't we just do the needful and Nigeria go to the ways of Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan for peace and progress? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The line is still open. We want to hear from you. Remember, it's a class, so we are all interacting. So this is your time to join the discourse. Join the conversation. Tell us what you know. Ask questions. And we also recommend books to you. After the class, you can visit udarabooks.com. Look at the titles there. At the moment, we have been able to put up to 500 titles in that store. And we are bringing in more titles on Nigerian history, old books. And if we need to get the right to go and reprint the ones that are out of print, we are going to do that. We are going to broaden the class. And it's about defining where we are coming from, where we are going, and understanding where we are. So the ball is in your court as we come to the end of this edition of the program. Mr. Ipadeola, let me ask these questions as we round off.
Okay.
Because I purposely put them down here. One of the questions is this. Is Yorubaland about to start witnessing its own version of violent uprising? Hold on. Let's give this caller our preference. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Okay.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Please, I want us. You can hear me. Okay? I'm calling from Italy. My name is Samson.
All right,
Please,
Samson.
I only listen to your class. I salute. I greet the person that being beside you, your guest, and I greet the radio man also. Please, my question is that how can we remove from this situation? Because I only listen to all your program. Afenifere, the South, they're always crying for restructuring Nigeria. And this people they are hearing, they are not going to restructure Nigeria. How Nigerian people can remove from this situation? This is my question, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I think you have been making that point that we need to redefine, but you can answer the question, Mr. Ipadeola.
Okay, thank you for the question. Are we witnessing, is Yorubaland witnessing?
It's about to witness its own version of violent uprising?
Violent uprising. You see, violence is structural. The last stage, the end stage of violence is when you see actual physical confrontation, encounters between people with guns, machetes, and whatnot. But that is always the tip, the visible tip of the iceberg. There is usually a structure that is 100 times bigger, submerged beneath. What I mean by that is this. I alluded to Gaza, which is called the world's largest open prison. And the truth of the matter is that people were leaving Nigeria to go and seek asylum in Gaza before the war. That tells you something about where we are in Nigeria. We don't like to declare it openly, but Nigeria is actually in a very violent standoff with itself. There's something doctors call the autoimmune disease. That is when cells within the body starts to attack other cells within the same body. Nigeria has autoimmune disease. And it is a disease that manifests as the ruling class attacking the root or the citizens. In fact, I will go even further to say we have not yet evolved the concept of citizenship yet in this country called Nigeria. Otherwise, using the Bobrisky analogy, there will be equal prosecution of all those who have mutilated the Naira, not just one case. But let me even go further to say.
Now, my question is Yoruba State, Yoruba land about to witness its own version of violent uprising?
We have been living a very violent reality for years. I went to law school in Lagos in the early 90s, 92, 93. And I can tell you that all these boys called operatives now were the ones ruling the streets in Lagos even back then, these area boys. So how else would you define violence? You see, you and I, we go to school, we come out with degrees, we think we own the country. But do we own the streets? If you took your cameras to certain portions of Ibadan today, it is because some elements on the streets recognize your voice that they will refrain from extorting you.
Even before I move in, I have already negotiated with them.
With them.
So one of them will now lead me in.
And for every one of you, there is 50 of them.
Yeah.
If we were wise and we did what W.E.B. Du Bois advised us to do as the elite in Africa, we will make sure that those masses have food. Those masses have education. You are doing your best. You are conducting classes on air. But let's hope that they have something to receive the class. Maybe a cell phone or radio or, something.
So let me rephrase the question. Is Yorubaland about to witness an organized, violent uprising?
I am afraid you're right. It has always, the potential has always been there. But for some reason, it has not come to a head until now. The element of organization, which you have just put a finger on, is what should get our leaders worried. Because you have pockets here and there in the past, nothing organized, but this one is organized. And that should get us worried.
Is violence the best approach in the pursuit of socio-political aspirations?
Absolutely not. And history has shown us this many times. When we, as leaders, do what we should do, there will be minimum violence. But when we refuse to do, the adage says a hungry man is an angry man. It is somebody who has eaten breakfast that would eagerly look forward to state affairs by Edmond Obilo and say, yes, I'm learning something. You can see that the Nigerians who are responding, half of them are abroad. So it tells you something. Because the rest are in Nigeria and they're busy looking for the urgent 2K that they will, use to hold body and soul together. So when we are talking about violence, we must realize that the potential is always there.
I was reading the Punch. The Punch in its 18 April 2024 editorial says, indeed, violence is not the answer. Separatist groups like the Irish Republican Army and the Basque separatist group in Spain had to renounce violence to realize their objectives. So in my note, I said, the Irish and Basque movement, if they had not taken up arms, would government have called them to the negotiation table?
Good question. And my answer may shock you.
Okay.
You see, you have to understand European history and African history in context.
Okay.
What drove the Europeans to come to Africa in the first place? Or to go to the New World, or to Australia in the first place? Because there was mass poverty and there was crime. And they needed to do something to make sure that the population in Europe was manageable. So they sent their most violent to Australia, their most adventurous to America, and some to Africa. Africa never had that problem. Yesterday, I was with some friends. We went on a field trip to Okeogun, to the suspended lake. We saw huge territory. Some some planted, some not planted. And you see children with mangoes, some with cashew. Africa never had that problem because at any point in time, there will be something that you can eat. And we had the sun in abundance. So we really never were that impoverished. However, we are living in the 21st century now. The reality is different. Europe has used the muscles and blood and sweat of black people to build significant, in fact, astronomical wealth in America and in their homeland. But Africa still remains where it is. Now we are beginning to open our eyes and see, and we can see that we are not where we should be. But instead of the elite to come together with the masses, the elite has decided that they would rather buy 160 million worth of jeeps each, while the rest of us navigate the streets on Okada. That is a violent situation. It will come to a head. It is not sustainable. We need a responsive leadership that will realize that it's better that the roads are level, so that nobody has to buy SUV that will cost so much. So that if a teacher has a salon car, and when I was growing up, Chief Awolowo paid his private secretary the salary of a Nigerian senator. That is the truth. Ode Ofemo is still alive. He will confirm this, so that he can face the job of reading all those books and making a summary for Chief Awolowo on a daily basis. So, but who can afford to pay any employee the equivalent of what the Nigerian senator is taking home today? If I were president, no Nigerian senator will earn more than a Nigerian university professor. And then we will know those who really want to help Nigeria.
What are the consequences of a state modeled to enrich the political elite and impoverish the largest number?
That state has no future. History is full of such states. We have even forgotten the names of most of them, because the logic of confrontation between the classes is that eventually, it may not happen within a generation, eventually the masses will have an uprising and they will take over and they will redistribute what they understand correctly to be the commonwealth. If our leaders in Africa were to sit down and humble themselves and ask honest questions of themselves, they will realize that actually they don't gain anything by keeping the continent in this state. And the irony of the situation is that when you go to Botswana, which is a relatively poor country in Africa, there's more equality, there's a higher standard of life. But when you get to Congo, which is the richest country mineral-wise on earth, you begin to realize, okay, Africa, we really need to talk and we really need to make things right.
Then the last question I wrote down that you will help me solve: is violent agitations going to soar in response to Nigeria's highly criticized constitution?
I am afraid so, if preemptive measures are not taken. And by preemptive measures, I don't mean cosmetic measures. I mean real measures to make sure that the masses can actually breathe. Because the state has put its knees on the necks of the masses. The fact that you have these desperados assaulting what they see as symbols of the state. They did it on a non-working day. But if care is not taken, they will come on a day that people are actually at work. And then we will know just how determined they are. But we really don't need to wait until things get to that point. We can seriously do something about it and make sure that people have, a semblance of a life worth living.
Dupe Onitiri declared a Yoruba state wearing white. What is the significance of white?
Oh, she's trying to say she's peaceful, even though some of the boys who operated, supposedly, we are not sure. The matter is in court. So, and anybody can claim that anybody else is the sponsor. But we do know that long term, nobody is an island. The Yoruba cannot do it alone. The Igbo cannot do it alone. The Hausa cannot do it alone. The Igala cannot do it alone. We have evolved to need each other. And we cannot live otherwise.
You know, there was one analysis I wanted us to carry out, but we can't do that because the analysis will be deep. It's about this work, a state of our own.
Osagai.
It's a lecture delivered in London by Professor Wosa Osagai. It's a classic lecture. You'll find this lecture on udarabooks.com. I wanted to discuss the lecture because I've done an analysis of the lecture. But I will wait for Tade Ipadeola to go study it keenly.
Or a classist.
Until I see him again, we will discuss it. So I brought your own copy for you. This is your copy.
Thank you very much.
Yes, so take time. So when next we see,
we are discussing this.
We are discussing this. A state of our own. I've given him his copy. So you get your copy on udarabooks.com. It's a lovely read. You know, the professor of political science did some creative work here. And I've interviewed him on it. So someday I'm going to play that interview while breaking down this work. Another book you should read, because we have been saying the North. I also discovered that many of us in the South don't really understand the North. Even at some point, I began to feel that I've read too much of Southern scholars. So I said, no, that is not balanced knowledge. I need to begin to read even what Northerners are writing, though they are not writing enough. Look at this work, A History of the Tuareg Migration from Niger Republic to Sokoto. You know, why does Buhari love Niger so much, you know? If you read this work, you will understand why. You will understand the Hausa states and the Fulani state, and you will now understand their political makeup and their thinking. If you don't understand the thinking of a man, you always misinterpret the man. So this is a classic. It's one of the books about northern Nigeria that we are now putting on udarabooks.com. A History of the Tuareg Migration from Niger Republic to Sokoto. It's a PhD work. So when I'm published by, it was sponsored by TED Fund. It's a PhD work. So it's well researched. And there's a topic that I've been reading. Let's look at it, the table of content. You know, chapter 4 is entitled Minerals Revolution in Niger and Nigeria and the Tuareg Migration. You know, today we are talking about mining communities. How terrorists and bandits are taking over mining communities in Zamfara. You would understand why. So if we have been studying, especially our leaders, would have checked all these uprisings before they happened. If you read chapter 4, you will find the uranium economy in Niger, the uranium economy and agriculture, uranium economy and the livestock sector. In fact, in recent time, this is one of the best books I'm reading. And it's written by Mohammed Kwari. This PhD was done in 2002. It's a deep work of research. I recommend it to you. You can get it on udarabooks.com or you get it through Udarabooks WhatsApp numbers. We are talking about the Yoruba Nation. For all those who love the Yoruba Nation, it's time to begin to read. I am reading and I'm learning by the day. You see, this is a big book, one of the biggest books on udarabooks.com, and it's so heavy. I'm struggling to carry it. The print Excellently printed. The publication is sweet. Culture and Customs of the Yoruba. Edited by Tony Falola and Akintunde Akinyemi. You know why I love edited work? It's not just about the thoughts of one person. You know, this book has about 50 persons, intellectuals, writing on different aspects of the Yoruba Nation. It is a classic on the Yoruba Nation. Culture and Customs of the Yoruba. Get your copy on uderabooks.com. We have 8 copies left, and the book is out of print.
Wow.
It's out of print. I've called Professor Falola, when are you reprinting? He said, if we reprint now, we might be selling the book for 100,000 naira. Because it was printed about 10 years ago. Let me see, was it 10 years? When did we put it on Udara Books? I just want to be sure. 2017, okay? That is 7 years ago. 7 years ago. Get your copy on udarabooks.com. The Yoruba Nation. You know, Tinubu is the Yoruba president. The Yorubas are in charge at the moment. Watch as the Yoruba Nation unravels. What is Tinubu's plan? What do you think Tinubu is thinking? Is he up to something? Is Tinubu up to something? Another work on the Yoruba Nation. Yoruba Nations and Politics. I have not opened a page of this book because I have so many books I'm reading. Udara book, we've had this book in the last 1 year, but we refused to put it on the store. Okay, I wanted to read it first before I put it on the store. But immediately this guy struck on Saturday. I said, okay, I don't have to wait to read it. You can see it's still sealed. This is my copy. I've not opened it. It's my copy. We put it on. I like reading a book before I put it on the store. At least have an idea. I might not finish it, but have an idea of the book. So I just had to call 1 or 2 scholars. I said, explain this book to me. And immediately they did the explanation. I put it on the store. Yoruba Nation and Politics since the 19th century. Get your copy on udarabooks.com. Tade Ipadeola, thank you for featuring on State Affairs.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, we have to go now.
We do.
I am Edmondo Pillow. I will be in class again on Monday. The class runs on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Except I'm not in town. On Wednesday, the class did not run, though I told you that on Monday, because I was attending a conference. That was why I was not in class on Monday. On Wednesday, rather. But I'm back now. I learned a lot from the conference. And someday I'll be sharing my experiences at the conference with you. So on Monday, join us. Join us on Wednesday too and on Friday. If I'm not going to be there, I will let you know. So thank you for always being there. The guys on X, thank you. On YouTube, you're watching on Facebook, thank you. You are watching on LinkedIn. We appreciate you. We also want you to also continue to repost, continue to share, so that the message will get to more Nigerians, Africans, and the global community. Thank you for being there. See you soon.